I stood at the stove, watching the steam rise from the kettle, soft and white like ribbon smoke curling in the sunlight. The scent of cinnamon hung in the air, and the muffins were cooling neatly on the counter beside a fresh dish towel I'd folded into thirds. The clock ticked its same old rhythm behind me. Everything felt warm and right until that door slammed open. Jacob's boots hit the linoleum too hard. I didn't even get a hello. "This isn't a nursing home," he shouted. My hand jerked just enough to send a spoon clattering into the sink. The kettle sang high and shrill, as if echoing him. He didn't look at me. He didn't even glance at the table I'd set, or the tea steeping in his favorite cup. I turned slowly, my mouth parting just slightly, but nothing came out. My heart kicked once, hard. "Jacob?" I tried. He waved a hand as if swatting away. The words, "I can't breathe in here, Grandma. Everything smells like old books and cinnamon." I looked down at my apron, the one his mother had sewn for me. The warmth in the room disappeared like someone had opened every window and let winter in. He paced the kitchen like it was too small to hold him. His eyes darted around, first the curtains, then the crocheted coasters, the floral dish towels I'd made by hand. He yanked at the edge of one curtain like it had wronged him. I saw it then. He didn't see memories, or love, or care in these things. He saw clutter. He saw age. He saw me in everything, and that made him feel caged. "This place," he muttered, shaking his head. "It's like walking into a time capsule." I wanted to speak, to tell him that every stitch, every frame on the fridge carried decades of breath and loss and laughter. But I just stood there, watching his jaw clench. My house has been my comfort, my roots, my living scrapbook. But in his eyes, it had turned into a symbol of everything he wanted to run from. That curtain he'd touched trembled slightly in the breeze, and for some reason, I couldn't take my eyes off it. I wasn't prepared for this kind of rejection, not from him, not after all I had given up. He didn't see it, any of it. The car I'd sold, the old Buick with the cracked leather seats and the chipped maroon paint, wasn't just a car. That was Sunday freedom. That was me driving alone with the windows down, wind in my hair, no destination except peace. I let it go for him, not with regret, with love. But now he stood there, picking apart my wallpaper, not even noticing what I'd lost to get him through the doors of that college. "You could have kept it," he mumbled, more to himself than me. I didn't ask for that. My throat tightened. I wanted to say, "No, sweetheart, you didn't ask. That's what made it love." But the words sat heavy and unsaid. I reached for the drawer by the stove, my fingers brushing the old keychain that used to hang from that car's ignition. Faint scent of leather, a ghost of a choice, and just like that, I felt small, smaller than I had in decades. He leaned against the counter, arms folded, eyes sharp. "You're trying to control me," he said flatly. The words didn't shout. They didn't need to. They landed with more weight than any yell ever could. I felt them bruise something soft in me. Something that had only ever loved him in the quietest ways. Paying bills he never saw, covering his bus fare with the last of my check, saving birthday cards in a shoebox under my bed. And now he thought, I was trying to control him? I didn't move. Didn't cry. I just stood there, blinking slowly, like time had rewound, and I was 16 again, being told to hush in a room full of louder men. "I never asked you to do any of it," he added, not even looking at me now. I whispered, mostly to myself. That was never the point, but I don't think he heard. Or maybe he wasn't ready to. I reached for the teacup on the counter, my fingers trembling slightly. It had gone lukewarm. Still, I lifted it with both hands, slow and steady, like the act itself could hold me together. The blue china clinked, softly against the saucer as I set it back down. That sound, it felt like the only thing in the room that hadn't changed. I stared at the tea, Its color had deepened, stronger now, bitter probably. But I didn't sip. I told myself, if I stay calm, maybe he'll see me again. Not as the old woman who folds laundry and watches the news with the volume too high, but as the woman who once sang him lullabies, who stayed up with him during chickenpox, who sold her past to give him a future. I folded the corner of my napkin just to keep my hands moving. The room felt heavier than usual. The wind through the window smelled like tea and biscuits and heartbreak. I didn't want to speak out loud. He didn't say goodbye, just turned toward the door and yanked it open. The slam shook the whole kitchen. The spoons in the drawer clinked against one another like startled birds. A single photo on the fridge slipped sideways under the magnet. I stayed still. My knees locked in place. The kettle had stopped hissing. The clock ticked louder now, slow and steady, as if waiting for me to breathe again. I looked at the empty chair across from me. His tea sat untouched, cooling beside the biscuits I'd meant to wrap in a napkin for him to take on the road. The sun had shifted, shadows now stretched long across the linoleum. I listened to the quiet, not the painful kind, not yet. Just the kind that comes when something breaks, but doesn't shatter. I whispered to the empty room, "This isn't the end," and I believed it. Maybe. Because some cracks don't mean collapse. Some cracks just let the light in. Someday. Rain slammed, the windshield like it had a grudge. I leaned forward, eyes squinting past the blurry shine of headlights bouncing off the wet road. Wipers thumped and squealed, struggling to keep up. I didn't slow down, not once, not even when thunder cracked like it was chasing me. He used to hate it when I drove in storms, said I wasn't careful enough, said I needed to stop thinking, like a girl, and be realistic. His words were always clipped, sharp like broken glass, and somehow colder than the rain pouring down around me now. But I wasn't afraid of the storm. The storm didn't tell me I was too old to dream. It didn't ask me to shrink. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles pale, leather warm beneath my palms. The inside of the Buick smelled like damp wool and old leather and something deeper, like memory, like freedom still trying to take shape. I whispered under my breath, "Keep going." Because this time, I wasn't turning around. I pulled under a flickering gas station awning just as the rain started coming sideways. I turned the engine off, letting the quiet settle like mist around me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that eerie blue-white glow. I reached across the seat and opened the glove box, receipts, a crumpled tissue. And there it was, folded, a little smudged, but still intact. The pamphlet, writing course. Nashville. I unfolded it slowly, hands a little shaky. The lightning lit up the dashboard, and I traced the letters with my finger like they were holy. I'd found it at the grocery store weeks ago, hidden it away like a secret too fragile to speak. I'd never told him. I hadn't told anyone. I held it in my lap and whispered, "You still want this, don't you?" And deep down, I did. I wasn't running from a man. I was driving toward a woman I used to be, someone with stories, not silence. Someone who belonged somewhere. The suitcase didn't weigh much. It wasn't supposed to. Just 2 dresses, 1 good pair of shoes. My mama's photo tucked in the front zipper pocket and my old paperback of To Kill a Mockingbird. I didn't pack an umbrella. Didn't even think to bring a jacket. But I packed hope, more of it than I had in years. Wild, clumsy, glowing hope. I stood in the dim bedroom, zipper rasping in the stillness. My fingers trembled, not from fear but something stranger. Like a heartbeat under my skin that wasn't mine. Something old waking up. I brushed off my coat sleeve. It still smelled faintly of gardenia perfume. The scent hit me deep, like my mama's hug after church on warm spring Sundays. I sat the suitcase down by the door, took a breath, and whispered, "Let's go." The The door gave a low creak as I pushed it open. Bells above it jingled, soft and tired. The diner was half empty, 2 truckers near the window, a man dozing in a booth with his cap over his eyes. I slid into a corner booth, my coat soaked through, hair dripping down my back. Water pooled under my elbows, and I didn't even bother wiping it up. A waitress walked over, didn't ask a thing, just set down a cup of black coffee and gave me a quiet nod before disappearing. The neon sign in the window buzzed faintly. Open. The red glow bled across the floor, shaking slightly with each flicker. I stared at it like it was the only thing keeping me tethered. I didn't cry. Not once. I let the silence wrap around me like an old wool blanket, scratchy, but real. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing everything I'd left behind down into the gutters. I watched it slide down the glass and thought, maybe this is what starting over feels like. Not loud, not bold, just still. I never told anyone her name. The Buick, I called her Freedom. She carried me out of Georgia, out of that house, out of 10 years of biting my tongue. She wasn't just a car. She was my companion in escape. Her tires knew the weight of every word I never said out, loud. There were dents on the passenger side from where I hit a trash can my first week on my own. A scratch on the hood from a parking lot scuffle with a mailbox. I didn't fix any of it. Those marks were proof I survived. Years later, when I signed the title over for Jacob's tuition, I sat in the driver's seat one last time, ran my fingers over the wheel. I kissed it, soft, just once. "I'm not selling you," I whispered. "I'm sending you forward. He'll never know. And that's okay, because some legacies don't come with speeches. They come with keys." Stood at the window tonight, arms crossed over my chest, staring at the empty driveway where the Buick used to sit. To Jacob, it was just an old car with bad mileage and squeaky doors. He never knew what it carried, what it meant. I never told him that it saved me long before it served him. But maybe it's time. I turned from the window, the porch light flickering softly behind me. Outside, the earth smelled of rain and wet roots. Crickets chirped low in the grass, like they knew how long the night could stretch. Some truths take decades to bloom. They wait in the soil of your chest until you're brave enough to unearth them. I walked to the drawer by the fridge and pulled out a piece of paper. Maybe just a note, a story, a seed, because someday he'll need to know, and I'll need to have said it. I was folding towels in the next room, still warm from the dryer, the kind that smell like sunshine and lavender when you press them to your cheek. The house was quiet, soft, comforting, that kind of stillness I'd come to enjoy in the late morning. Then I heard it, a faint sound, pages turning, slow and unsure. Not the kind of flip you hear when someone's looking for a recipe or a loose note. This was careful, curious, like the fingers weren't sure they belonged. My hands froze mid-fold. I didn't have to peek to know where he was. The Bible. I hadn't touched it in years, not like that, not since the day I pressed that paper. Between Corinthians and Psalms, like it belonged with God's mercy. My heart fluttered just once, like a bird startled awake. I kept still, listening to the creak of the floor as he shifted. He didn't know what he was about to find, but I did. He didn't say a word, not even when I stepped softly into the room, a hand still damp from the towel I was folding. He was, seated at the kitchen table, the Bible open wide, a slip of yellowed paper in one hand. I knew what he was looking at. The title to the Buick, folded into that same soft square I'd pressed between the verses. Pressed and prayed over too many times. Beside it, tucked like a blessing, was the letter. His mother's handwriting was still strong, still looped in the way only she could write. I didn't need to see it to know which one it was. Jacob didn't look up. His brow furrowed, his lips slightly parted. The dust in the light between us floated like something holy, like time had stopped to let him understand. I stood in the doorway, just a few feet away, but it felt like miles. I watched his chest rise and fall slow, like he was steadying himself. That silence? It wasn't empty. It screamed. His fingers tightened around the paper. His voice came low, almost like a whisper torn open. "Why didn't you tell me?" I stepped forward, but not too far. I didn't want to make the answer feel like an excuse. "I didn't know how," I said. He looked at me then, not mad, just hurt, like someone who'd opened a present only to find it had been his all along, and now it felt too big to hold. "I thought you kept the car because, I don't know. I thought it meant something to you." "It did," I said gently. "That's why I gave it up." He blinked, chest rising, throat working to swallow words that never came. "Jacob," I continued, my voice soft, "sometimes the kindest thing you can do is give something away and never speak of it. Not because it's small, but because it's too heavy to ask someone to carry." He nodded once. That pain didn't fade, but maybe, just maybe, he saw it now for what it was. Love, quiet and breaking. His eyes drifted down to the letter. He unfolded it slowly, careful, like it was glass. I saw him pause at the first line. His lips moved silently as he read. He didn't have to tell me what it said. I remembered every word. Her handwriting hadn't faded, not one bit. Just seeing it again made my knees feel unsteady. Like grief had tapped me on the shoulder, just to remind me it still lived here. That letter, it smelled faintly of her, not perfume, just her, paper and baby lotion, and the ghost of her favorite shampoo. He traced a line with his finger, then stopped halfway. "She told you to raise me brave," he whispered, barely audible. I nodded, swallowing the lump that had suddenly grown too large to speak around. She said, "Give him strength, even if it costs you peace." I remembered her last Christmas, the way her hand had held mine, that quiet plea tucked between laughter and songs, and I kept that promise, even when it tore something from me that I never got back. He stared at me for a long while, not blinking much. His eyes didn't look angry or even sad. They looked new, like he was seeing someone he'd never really met before. I shifted under the weight of it, my fingers gently brushing crumbs off the table that weren't even there. This table had seen so much: homework, birthday candles, meatloaf Mondays. But at that moment, it felt like a courtroom. I was on trial in his mind. The woman who made cornbread, the woman who read bedtime stories, the woman who scolded gently when he left the milk out, and now, the woman who sold her freedom for his future. His mouth parted, like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. I looked away, down at the crossword puzzle he'd started and left unfinished. I couldn't hold his gaze. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because being seen, truly seen, by the one you love most, it's the bravest and most terrifying thing a person can feel. We didn't speak for a while. The clock ticked. The breeze moved through the screen door, brushing the edge of the curtain like a quiet apology. I sat across from him, hands folded in my lap. His fingers tapped the table lightly, once, then again, then stopped. "No, thank you. No, I'm sorry." Just stillness. Thick with everything neither of us had the words for. I didn't need his gratitude. I needed him to know, to really know. Not just what I did, but why I did it. That it wasn't a grand gesture. It was just love, plain, steady, costly. He looked up finally, his eyes a little softer now, and I exhaled, not a sigh, but something gentler, like the beginning of something not broken. The storm between us hadn't passed, but I saw it then, the clouds thinning. A crack of sky breaking open just wide enough for a little sunbeam, and in that quiet I felt it. We were going to be okay. Not fixed, but okay. The sun was warm on my shoulders, and the lemonade had started to sweat through the plastic pitcher. My sisters-in-law were fussing with the potato salad, arguing over whether it needed more relish, while the kids tossed beanbags near the edge of the trees. Laughter drifted over from the other table, light and harmless. But I felt it. Before he even opened his mouth. Jacob was shifting in his seat, face a little too flushed, his soda untouched. I knew that posture. Tight shoulders, bouncing knees. Something was building, like the way the sky feels right before it cracks. He stood up too fast. His napkin fluttered to the grass. The sound of flies buzzing near the mustard jar didn't stop, but everything else seemed to still. I looked up at him slowly, praying it was just a moment. A mood, but it wasn't. I saw the storm brewing in his face. And the worst part? It wasn't aimed at the weather. It was aimed at me. He didn't soften his tone. Not for me. Not for the cousins or the neighbors. You only gave up your car so everyone would feel sorry for you, he said, loud enough that even the kids looked over. My breath caught, but I didn't speak. I just looked at him. I mean, come on. He went on, hands in the air. Do you think I didn't notice? The way you sigh when people bring it up? You wanted to be the hero. My heart dropped to the pit of my stomach. My car, my little bit of freedom, reduced to a stunt? I didn't want praise. I didn't want a spotlight. I only ever wanted him to have more than I did. That was the whole point. People stopped chewing. One cousin's hand froze over the cooler. The laughter from the other table faded like it had been turned off. They didn't look at him. They looked at me. And it wasn't a pity on their faces. It was a curiosity. Sharp and sticky. Like they were all wondering if maybe he was right. I had a serving spoon in my hand, halfway to scooping out a portion of peach cobbler. My grip stayed firm, but I felt the heat crawl up my neck the moment the words landed. Didn't look up. I just stared at the peaches, the syrupy glaze catching the sunlight, the scent of cinnamon and sugar wrapping around me like my mother's apron. That cobbler was safe. It was sweet. It was a memory. But at that moment, it felt foreign. The air around me felt thin, like I was a guest in my own skin. A stranger at my own family table. The dish wobbled slightly in my hand, and I steadied it without thinking. I've learned over the years how to keep my hands calm even when my heart isn't. I gently set the spoon down. The cobbler steamed. In its dish, innocent and warm, unaware of the ache rising in my chest, and all I could think was how quickly love could be misunderstood. No one said a word, not his uncles. Not the cousins who'd once lined up for my Christmas cookies. Not even Mary Ellen, who knew better, who knew what that Buick meant to me. They just looked away, back to their plates, their drinks, their safe distractions. Not one person said, "Jacob, that's enough." Not one person met my eyes, and it didn't feel cruel. It felt hollow, like something inside me tipped over, and everything I'd ever poured into it had leaked out without me noticing. I wasn't angry. That would have meant I had energy left to fight. I just felt emptied. Like I had offered and offered and offered, until I forgot to save a little for myself. And now, here I stood, wondering if love without applause was even seen. The trees cast long shadows across the yard. A soda can popped open in the distance. The breeze cooled, but it wasn't comfortable. It just moved past me, like they all did. I smiled. Because what else can a woman do when her dignity starts to slip through her hands like water? I nodded once, set the cobbler dish down like it was just another serving bowl, not the thing that had just held my last ounce of comfort. Then I turned. "Excuse me," I said, quiet and clean, like I wasn't crumbling inside. I walked slowly past the folding chairs and plastic cups behind the shed where no one would see me. The moment I was alone, I let out one long breath, ragged at the edges. But I didn't cry. I leaned against the wood, closed my eyes, and listened. The cicadas hummed all around me, loud, relentless, like static on an old radio. I wondered, in that small, hidden place, if pain always sounded so loud in your own chest, or if maybe I'd just never stopped hearing it. But I stayed quiet. Because even then, I didn't want to be the one who made a scene. The sun was slipping low, casting everything in gold and plum. The picnic table looked half forgotten now. Paper plates stacked, foil lids peeled back, laughter gone. Everyone had packed up, gone home with full bellies and empty words. I stood at the table alone, spoon in one hand, foil in the other. I scraped what was left of the baked beans into a container. Wrapped the potato salad carefully. Then I made a plate, one for him. I didn't measure anything. I just knew what he liked, a little of everything, and a sliver of cobbler. The foil crinkled softly as I sealed it, the sound delicate against the hush. No one would see. No one would ask why, but maybe love isn't what you say under string lights and loud music. Maybe it's what you do when no one's watching, and I'd spent a lifetime loving in silence. So I made him a plate, and I left it on the porch, still. Warm. The phone rang sharp and sudden, right in the middle of folding a dish towel, the kind of ring that makes your heart skip, even if it's probably nothing. I wiped my hands and walked over slowly, thinking it was my neighbor with another pie recipe or a robocall about car insurance. But the voice on the other end wasn't canned or cheerful. It was trembling. "Ma'am?" he said, breath catching. "I'm Jacob's roommate." My fingers tightened around the phone. "He hasn't eaten in 3 days," he said quickly, like he'd practiced it. "He won't leave the room. He doesn't talk. I didn't know who else to call." The golden light in the kitchen suddenly felt dim. My knees gave out a little, but I caught myself on the counter. "I'm on my way," I said. Calm, clear. Didn't ask questions. Not yet. I just reached for my keys, the wind chimes on the porch barely clinking behind me, as if they too were holding their breath. I ladled the soup into a wide-mouthed jar, still warm and steaming from the stove. Chicken, carrots, a sprig of rosemary. I wiped the rim, tightened the lid, and wrapped it in a towel. Then I folded the blanket, the soft gray one he used to drag around the house, and tucked in his favorite lemon cookies, the ones with the powdered sugar that always stuck to his chin. Everything about the bag was comfortable. Everything about my chest was aching. Had I been too hard on him? Or worse, had I vanished when he needed me loudest? That kind of shame doesn't shout. It whispers. You should have known. I zipped the bag slowly, careful like it might explode if I moved too fast. Then I walked out to the car. The shadows stretched long across the carport, and the air clung to my skin, thick with late summer heat and something heavier. I slid the key into the ignition. My hands looked steady on the wheel. But my heart? It was trembling in places no one could see. The road felt longer than it ever had. Longer than all the years between his childhood and now. My headlights cut through the dark, but just barely. Trees rushed past on either side, tall and shadowed like they were keeping secrets. I passed through towns I didn't recognize. Gas stations glowing like lighthouses I didn't need. People I'd never know going home to someone, or no one. My hands clutched the wheel, tighter than they needed to. Every mile felt like a question. Every curve is another thing I'd forgotten to ask, or say, or do. I thought about the boy I once held during fevers. The one who used to climb into my bed after nightmares and say, "Tell me a good story." And now, silence. Not distance. Silence. Wide and wild as a canyon. The dashboard lights glowed soft and blue. I drove on, through it all, through the quiet ache of time. Because sometimes love doesn't rush. It shows up, even if it's late. The door opened slowly under my hand. It gave a low creak, and I stepped in without knocking. The room smelled like stale pizza, damp laundry, and something I couldn't name, something that clung to the air, loneliness maybe, or worry. Clothes were scattered, a sock on the desk lamp, an open textbook lying face down on the floor like it had given up mid-sentence. And there he was, curled on the bed, his back to the door, facing the wall. One arm wrapped around the Bible I gave him on Christmas after his mama passed. He didn't stir when I walked in, didn't look over, didn't expect to be found. My breath caught in my throat, not from shock, from sorrow, from knowing that whatever pride or pain had gotten him here, he hadn't let anyone see it until it spilled over. That's what broke me, not the mess, not the smell, but my grandson never expected me to come. I sat down slowly on the edge of his mattress. My coat was still on, my hands folded in my lap like they used to when I waited in Sunday service for the sermon to begin. I didn't speak, didn't reach for him. I just sat. The soft whir of a laptop. Fan filled the silence. The soup sat on the desk nearby, cooling gently. Its scent mingled with the stale air, a quiet invitation. I looked at him, and all I saw was the boy he used to be, the one I rocked through colic, whispering fairy tales, until he drifted off, the one who once held my finger in his sleep like it was an anchor. Time had turned him tall, grown, with opinions and pride and hard edges I didn't always understand. But now, in that small room, with his knees tucked close and the Bible clutched, like a lifeline, he looked just as fragile as the day his mama left him in my arms, and I loved him no less. He never said a word. Not a thank you. Not sorry. He just stayed there, small in the middle of all that pain. He didn't fight it, didn't hide, and somehow, that was enough. Boys don't know how to ask for rescue, not with words. They ask with silence, with stillness, with the way they stop trying to be strong. I stood slowly and placed the soup on the nightstand beside him. The jar was still warm. I brushed a crumb from the desk without thinking. "Eat when you're ready," I said softly. He didn't answer. But I felt something shift. Before I left, I paused in the doorway, turned back for just a moment and left the door cracked open, not wide, just enough, so that if he needed to follow, he'd see the light, and maybe that would be enough to find his way back. At first, I'd check the phone a dozen times a day. I'd jump when it rang, even if it was just the pharmacy or a robocall. Then I stopped jumping, stopped checking altogether. His voice faded from the house like the smell of pancakes long after breakfast done, the kind of absence that starts small, one missed call, one unanswered message, and then grows roots so deep you start forgetting where it started. I dusted his graduation photo less often. I folded one less napkin on Sundays. The chair he used to pull out with a loud scrape sat tucked in now, neat and quiet. Silence has a sound when it lingers long enough. It echoes through old piano keys no one plays anymore, through the wallpaper you haven't changed since his mother's last Christmas here. Late morning light filtered through the curtains in that soft, sleepy way. The fan hummed in the corner, stirring nothing but memory. The house didn't feel empty. It just felt adjusted, like it had learned to live without his voice. Just like I had. It was just another stack of mail. Coupons, a church bulletin, a postcard from the pharmacy reminding me I was due for a refill. I almost threw it all out. But then, an envelope, buried deep in the stack, plain and cream-colored. The handwriting wasn't fancy or neat, just steady, familiar. My hand stopped mid-motion. I pulled it from the pile slowly, fingers trembling before I even realized it. I turned it over. The postmark read, Michigan. It smelled faintly of pine, and something else I couldn't name right away. Possibility. I didn't open it right away. I sat at the dining table with it resting on my palm, the breeze from the open window nudging the edge of the lace tablecloth. The light made the ink look softer than it probably was, like it had waited too, and in that moment, holding that thin piece of hope in my hand, I realized he hadn't forgotten me. Not completely. The letter wasn't long, just one page, folded once, but it hollowed me out in the best kind of way. The way a river carves its own place through stone. He started with, "I was wrong, that was all it took." The rest of the letter was full of unpolished honesty, like someone learning how to speak kindness after a long silence. "I wasn't ready to understand you," he wrote. He didn't try to justify the hurt. He didn't try to fix it. He just held it up like a mirror and let me see that he'd finally seen me. I read it 3 times, maybe 4, before I finally let myself breathe. The pen scratches echoed in my memory, those tiny, uncertain loops in his G, the uneven way he spaced his lines. It made me smile, made me ache. The afternoon warmth settled over the room like a soft blanket, and I closed my eyes. Some letters don't ask for a reply. They are the reply. He said he was working construction. Long days, blistered hands, concrete dust in his eyelashes. But he said the rhythm helped him think. He wrote about framing beams and leveling foundations. Said he liked seeing something rise from nothing. Said it made his body tired and his heart a little clearer. I smiled, reading those lines. For years, I'd worried he was building walls between us, bricks of resentment, of pride, stacked quietly higher each time we misunderstood each other. But he wasn't. He was learning how to build homes, and in that single line, "I've started building things that last," I felt a piece of the wall inside me fall too. Outside, dusk was settling in. The sky was soft and pink, like it was holding its breath before the stars came out. The scent of wood smoke drifted in through the window, and the crickets started their evening chorus. And for the first time in a long while, I believed we might still be building something. Together. At the end of the letter, he asked one question. "Do you still have the porch swing?" Not, "Can I come home?" Not, "Do you forgive me?" Just that quiet, familiar thread between us, the one that used to rock beneath star-filled skies while I held his sleepy weight in my arms. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out. There it was, faded, yes, the paint chipped. One of the chains squeaked now and then, but it still swayed gently in the twilight breeze, still waiting for weight. And at that moment, I didn't see a question. I saw a promise. He remembered where we once sat, where stories were told and quiet was safe, where love was given without condition or countdown. The wind rustled the leaves, and the swing creaked once, like an invitation, and I whispered to the empty room, "Yes, Jacob, it's still here." I folded the letter like it was something sacred, edges smoothed, creases lined perfectly, not rushed, like I was wrapping something holy. Then I walked it to the drawer in my bedroom, the one that doesn't hold socks or receipts, the one that holds time, his baby shoes, soft, scuffed, still smelling faintly of powder, his mother's ribbon from prom night, a napkin from our last pie night, smudged with cinnamon and laughter. I placed the letter beside them. Some things aren't meant to be displayed. Some things are just meant to be held. The stars had started to blink awake outside the window. The soft scent of lavender sachet rose from the drawer. My lamp cast a warm glow across everything old and kept, and I whispered to the stillness, "This was enough." I heard it before I saw it. The crunch of gravel under tires, slow and unsure. The kind of sound that doesn't come with urgency, just hesitation. I peeked through the kitchen curtain. An old truck, paint chipped, tailgate dented. Familiar, but not mine. He didn't honk, didn't call ahead. He just stepped out. His overalls were worn at the knees. His hair is longer, shoulders broader. He looked like a man who'd learned to carry things without complaint. But his eyes, they scanned the yard like a stranger, like someone unsure they'd still be welcome. He stood near the fence, one hand brushing the top rail. The honeysuckle near the post was blooming, the scent sweet and heady in the warm spring air. My breath caught. He didn't move toward the porch, not right away, and I didn't go running either, because forgiveness doesn't come rushing in. It walks, quietly, and when it's real, it doesn't expect applause. He walked up the steps slowly, didn't meet my eyes at first, just looked at the swing, then down at the porch boards, one of them warped and peeling at the edge. He cleared his throat. "I want to fix the porch," he said. His voice cracked a little. I stood still for a beat, letting the words settle between us. Then I nodded. Sometimes repair begins in splinters and sweat. Sometimes it starts with wood and nails before it dares reach the heart. Without speaking, I turned and opened the shed, pulled out the old toolbox, still red, still rusted at the corners. He took it without a word, set it down beside the railing and knelt. A wasp floated by, slow and lazy. The midday sun warmed the porch planks beneath my bare feet. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and the beginning of something honest. We didn't say anything else. But something between us began to shift. We worked in a rhythm. He hammered, I painted, we took turns sanding. He steadied the beam while I drilled in the bolt. We didn't talk much, but the silence between us didn't feel heavy. It felt like breathing room, like trust returning inch by inch. The porch began to change, not just the wood, but the feeling, like it was waking up again. By the time the sun slid low on the horizon, the swing was ready. Fresh boards, new chain. He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand and gave it a soft push. It creaked, slow and familiar. I sat down first. He joined me a moment later, not quite touching, but close. The golden light of early evening wrapped around us. Birds chirped their goodnight songs in the dogwood trees. He leaned back, exhaled deep. I turned my head and looked at him. Really looked, and for the first time in years, I saw the boy again. The one who scraped his knee and cried for more jelly on his toast. And I smiled. We were sipping lemonade from mason jars, condensation dripping down the glass. A breeze lifted the scent of mint from the herb bed near the steps. We didn't rush to speak, just let the coral light of sunset settle over the porch. Then he said, "Her name's Melissa." I raised an eyebrow, waiting. "She's got calloused hands," he said, chuckling softly. "Works wood better than I do. Laughs like creek water." I felt something shift in his voice, soft and reverent, not bragging, just unfolding. "She reminds me of you," he added, quieter now. I pretended not to melt, but inside, oh, my heart. Love, when spoken gently like that, doesn't need fanfare. It plants itself quietly, deep in old gardens. And somehow, even after everything, it still finds the strength to bloom. I nodded slowly, sipping my lemonade. "Well," I said, "if she's half as stubborn as me, you better be kind." He laughed. That warm, easy laugh I hadn't heard in far too long. His hands were rougher than I remembered. When he passed me the hammer, I saw the scabs along his knuckles. Small, healing, tender. I reached for his hand before I even thought about it. He didn't pull away. "Drywall," he said, shrugging with a crooked half-smile. Got a little frustrated. But I recognized that look. I'd seen it when he was 10 and slammed his door too hard. When he was 16, he punched a wall after his girlfriend left him. This time, though, the anger had softened. It wasn't wild anymore, just worn down into something gentler. I brushed my thumb across the worst of it. "You're learning," I whispered. He looked up, confused for a second. Not how to build, I added. How to stay. The porch light flickered on above us. Cicadas began their chorus in the trees. The air held us gently, warm, still, like a held breath between beats, and in that small touch we understood each other again. The swing creaked under us. Just once. We sat side by side in the soft hush of night, porch light casting long shadows across the floorboards. A few nails were crooked. One board squeaked every time I shifted my weight, but it held. It held both of us. And that was enough. He leaned his head back against the post, arms resting on the chain, eyes turned to the sky. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. I looked out at the yard, the garden, the gravel drive, the quiet world we'd spent years trying to build and sometimes failing to keep. It didn't matter that the porch wasn't perfect. What mattered was that we built it together. The stars winked gently above us, scattered like little reminders that even broken things can shine. And for the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Not loud. Not grand, just steady, like a porch swing at night, holding weight without breaking. I was folding towels in the back room, the ones that still held the scent of lavender and sunshine from the clothesline. The fan hummed low, and the soft breeze carried in a whiff of magnolia from the tree out front. Then I heard it, that low, gravelly growl. My hands froze mid-fold. My breath followed. That engine. It couldn't be. I stepped quietly toward the front window, heart thudding in a rhythm I hadn't felt in years, pulled the lace curtain aside just a little. There she was, my Buick, dusty, faded. One headlight is dimmer than the other, but her shape was unmistakable, like recognizing someone you used to dream about. She pulled up slowly, like she belonged. Here. Like she was returning, not arriving. I pressed my hand gently against the window glass. Warm sunlight spilled across the floor behind me, but I couldn't feel it. All I could feel was the ache in my chest. That car, my car, had come home. She stepped out first, brown hair pulled back in a low braid, tall and calm, like the kind of woman who wasn't afraid of silence. I knew in my gut, Melissa. She walked up the path with confidence, not arrogance. The kind of walk women have when they know how to build things. Her jeans were dusty, and there was oil on her sleeve. "Ma'am," she smiled, soft and steady. He wanted this to be a surprise. Her voice had honey in it, kindness too. No nerves, just grace. My throat caught, not from shock, but from the way being remembered can sneak up on you when you've stopped expecting it. The wind picked up slightly, fluttering the wind chimes above the porch. I smelled engine oil and fresh air. And something else I couldn't name. Hope, maybe. I nodded once, not trusting my voice. Not yet. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the kind of peace that comes when someone finishes your sentence without saying a word. He came around the front of the truck, wiping his hands on his jeans. A smear of grease ran across his cheek like a child's smudge of finger paint. His hair was a little longer than the last time I saw him. His smile, too. "Still running," he said, beaming, the pride in his voice mixed with something softer, boyishness. Memory. I stared at him and then at the car, my car, not just fixed, restored, not for use, for meaning. He didn't need the Buick, but he brought her back because he knew. He knew what she had carried, who she had carried. I couldn't speak. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I suddenly understood that he had been listening, all along. Even in silence, the sunlight warmed the hood of the car, casting his shadow long down the drive. Somewhere nearby, a lawnmower hummed like background music, and for just a moment, everything in the world felt aligned. I stepped down the porch steps slowly, one hand trailing along the railing for balance. My knees don't move like they used to, but they remembered this walk. The Buick sat like a ghost from a good dream, not scary, just powerful, like she was waiting for me to come greet her. I reached out and let my fingers skim along her side. The paint was faded, chipped in places. But it didn't matter. Every dent was familiar. Every imperfection had a story. My palm landed near the back door, where I once pressed Jacob's lunchbox against the glass as he giggled in the back seat. The key was still in the ignition. I opened the door. That smell hit me all at once, sun-warmed. Vinyl, old pennies, engine oil, and time. A smell that made me feel 25 and 75 all at once. I stood there, hand on the doorframe, letting the wind carry the moment through me like a song I used to hum. This wasn't just a car, it was a chapter, and I hadn't finished reading it yet. I eased into the seat, careful not to catch the hem of my dress. The leather squeaked softly beneath me. "Let's see if she remembers me," I said under my breath, then pressed the horn. It let out the most ridiculous wheeze, like an old dog sneezing. Jacob and Melissa both jumped, startled, and I burst out, laughing, real, full, belly-deep laughter. The kind that shakes your ribs and fills your eyes with tears, not from pain, but from pure, sudden joy. It spilled out of me before I could stop it. I laughed until my chest hurt, until the car seat jostled beneath me. Melissa giggled from the porch steps, covering her mouth. Jacob smiled like he'd just handed me the sun, and for the first time in years, I laughed like no one was listening because they weren't judging, they were loving. He didn't say a word. He just reached into his pocket, pulled out the keys, and placed them in my palm. No speech, no, "Do you forgive me?" No, "I'm sorry." Just a moment, and at that moment, I understood. We weren't balancing debts anymore. We were balancing understanding. I curled my fingers around the keys. They were warm from his hand, heavy with meaning. Not because of the metal, because of everything they'd come to represent. He stepped back quietly. The car doors closed behind us, soft thuds in the still air. The porch behind me glowed in the slanting light of late afternoon, that golden hour where everything feels softer. We didn't need to fill the air with words. Some things come back not because they're owed, but because love circles back when it's ready. And sometimes, love takes the long road home. I stood in front of the mirror longer than I should have, the church dress hanging just right, but my heart was not quite in it. The choir music drifted faintly from a house down the street, warm and warbling, but even that didn't lift me. I'd had the kind of week where your soul just wants to sit still. The peach cobbler sat cooling on the counter, cinnamon thick in the air, crust golden and slightly uneven, just the way he used to like it. I nearly stayed home. I looked at my hands, steady but tired. The thought of making small talk under fluorescent lights made my stomach turn, but something tugged at me. Maybe it was the cobbler. Maybe it was the hope that someone, anyone, might see me a little differently tonight, not as grandma who gave up her car, or the quiet one who never asks for much. Just me. So I picked up the dish, tucked it in my arms, and walked out the door before I could change my mind. The church hall smelled like old recipes and older memories. Jacob held the door for me, his hand resting on the brass handle like he'd been doing it his whole life. We walked side by side. The smell of deviled eggs, scalloped potatoes, baked beans, and sweet tea hit me all at once. Folding chairs squeaked under shifting weight. Laughter came in short, scattered bursts. Someone across the room smiled too wide. I nodded back, smoothing the hem of my blouse as we passed the dessert table. I kept my shoulders back, trying not to fidget. This was my town. These were my people. But still, I felt small, like I was still being watched, still being weighed. Jacob whispered, "You okay?" as he took the cobbler from my hands and placed it gently among the pies. I nodded. "Just fine," I said, even if my voice was smaller than I wanted it to be. Sometimes being brave looks like showing up anyway. I was laying out paper plates near the drink station, the kind with little blue flowers printed along the edges, when I heard it. She just wants credit for raising him. It wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. The words floated just far enough to land, soft and sharp, like a thorn carried by the wind. I froze. My hands hovered over the napkins. The stack tilted slightly, but I didn't move. They didn't say my name. They didn't have to. I stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on a half-empty bowl of fruit salad, the colors too bright under the flickering lights. My heart didn't break. It dipped, sank, settled low in my chest like something heavy and familiar. Not because it was cruel, but because part of me feared it might be true. Had I given too much, too quietly? Had I hoped too deeply for someone to notice? The smell of ham glaze and cologne drifted past as chatter carried on. But for me, the room had narrowed to just that sentence, just that sting. He stood up slowly, no clinking glass, no calling for attention, just a quiet shift, like wind moving across a still lake. "I need to say something," Jacob said, his voice steady. Fork stopped. A chair squeaked. One baby somewhere cooed in the background, then went quiet. "My grandma didn't give up anything," he said. "She invested." You could hear the weight of it drop across the room. "She sold her car," he went on. "Not for thanks, not for show, for me. So I could get where I needed to go." His eyes never blinked. They didn't need to. She never asked for applause. But she deserves respect, because love like that, it builds people. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe for a second, not because I was embarrassed, because I'd never expected it. His words rolled out slowly, certainly, like thunder after a long silence. I just stood there, napkins in my hands, stunned by the sound of finally being seen. No one replied. A fork clinked against a plate. Someone cleared their throat. But mostly, there was quiet, the kind that doesn't feel awkward, the kind that settles like a blanket. I stood still. Slowly, I felt something bloom in my chest, not loudly, not like fireworks, but like a candle being lit in a very dark room. Jacob looked at me then, not as if he needed my approval, but like he finally understood who I really was. And for the first time in public, I saw it in his eyes. I wasn't just grandma. I was the foundation beneath his feet. A soft gospel hymn began to hum through the speakers. Overhead lights dimmed with the setting sun, and just like that, I stopped feeling small. By the time we left, the potluck had wound down to a few half-covered dishes and folding chairs being stacked in the corner. I picked up my cobbler dish, scraped clean. "Guess they liked it," Jacob said, nudging my elbow with a small grin. I smiled back, but not because of the pie. Something in me had settled. Not loudly, not dramatically, just settled. Like a weight had shifted off my shoulders without me noticing. We walked back to the car in the cool night air, the porch steps creaking as we reached them. Behind us, the scent of fading flowers and full bellies lingered on the breeze. Jacob held the door open again, like he'd always done it, and as I stepped inside, I thought, not everything needs fixing. Some things just need to be honored. The porch swing creaked beneath us, same as always, but the silence between us, it didn't feel hollow this time. It felt full, like something settling into its rightful shape. The stars had begun blinking awake, scattered across a deepening sky. The air was cool, soft with the scent of jasmine and fresh night. Jacob handed me a blanket. "Your legs," he said gently. I didn't need it for warmth. I needed it for grounding, for something to hold on to as the words I'd carried for years started to stir. I tucked the blanket across my lap, letting the weight settle. We didn't speak for a long moment, just rocked slowly, our feet brushing the porch wood in a rhythm that felt like breath. I glanced at him, older now, quieter, but still my boy. There was no better moment than this. I had waited years for the right breath, the right stillness. The words had been resting in my chest like stones, and now, finally, I was ready to let them go. I looked at his profile in the soft porch light, jawline strong like his mother's, brow furrowed the way hers did when she thought too hard. "She asked me to raise you bravely," I said quietly. "Not safe." He didn't turn, just listened. I stared at the porch rail, remembering that hospital room like it was yesterday. The way her hand had gripped my wrist, not desperate but certain. "She held me so tight," I whispered, like she was pressing her hopes right into my bones. He nodded slightly. She said, "Don't let him shrink to fit in. Let him stretch, even if it scares you." The breeze moved through the trees gently, like breathing through a sleeping chest. Somewhere far off, an owl called once and then fell silent. I paused, letting the memory breathe with us. "I tried," I said. "Lord knows I didn't always get it right, but I tried." Jacob didn't speak. But he didn't move away either, and in that stillness, I felt the door between us stay open. I told him about the storm, how I drove through Georgia rain so thick I couldn't see past the wipers, how the thunder cracked like it was trying to shake the shame out of me. "The diner smelled like burnt coffee and wet coats," I said. "I walked in dripping, sat in a booth and just stared at the menu like it was written in another language." He listened without blinking. "I left a man that night," I went on, voice steady. "A man who never let me dream out loud. Never let me imagine anything bigger than the dishes in the sink." His jaw tensed. I let the words sit. "And that Buick," I said, nodding toward the driveway. "The one that carried you to college. It's the same car that carried me out of silence." I looked at him then. "I never told you," I said, "because I didn't want you to carry it. I wanted you to rise clean." The frogs croaked in the distance, the wind calmed, and in that moment, I gave him my storm, not to drown him, but to set him free. He didn't say anything. He just reached across the blanket and took my hand. Gentle. Sure. His hand was warm, a little rough, calloused from work, from real life. I felt the pressure in his fingers, not tight, just a present. Didn't look at him. I looked at our hands, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't see a boy trying to find his place in the world. I saw a man with hands strong enough to build and soft enough to hold the truth without flinching. He didn't have to say he was sorry. He didn't have to thank me. That grip was everything. It was history. And healing. The porch swing stilled beneath us. Even the breeze seemed to quiet. The air smelled faintly of pine, a hint of varnish still clinging to the new boards we'd replaced weeks ago. And suddenly I realized I hadn't just raised a child, had raised a man with enough heart to hold the past gently. We didn't move. The sky began to soften at the edges, blue giving way to blush. The kind of quiet that only comes before birds remember to sing. We just sat. I looked out at the trees and remembered watching him sleep when he was little, his chest rising and falling while I whispered prayers into the dark. And now, here he was breathing beside me, taller, older, still mine, still here. The porch creaked as we shifted slightly, the rhythm slow and steady. He hadn't let go of my hand. The cool air brushed against my skin, bringing with it the smell of damp wood, wildflowers, and something else. Renewal. The birds started slowly, one after another, cautious and clear. Morning. Arrived like it had all the time in the world, and so did we. For years I wondered, had I done too much, or not enough? Was I foolish to give so quietly? Was I selfish to hope it might one day matter? But that morning, on that porch, his hand still resting in mine, I knew. I knew by the way the swing swayed steadily beneath us. I knew by the way the garden caught the sunrise just right, spilling gold across the grass like a thank you. I knew by the way Jacob didn't rush inside, didn't pull away, he just stayed, and I stayed with him. That was peace. Not loud, not shining like medals or trophies, just quiet, settled, the kind of peace that lives in your bones, that speaks without words, and says, "You gave what you could, you loved well, and finally, that was enough." If my story touched your heart, I kindly ask you to like this video and subscribe. I'll be here every day, sharing more stories just for you. Thank you, my dear.